Okay, today we're going to talk about the two sides of trust in a Dom-Sub dynamic. You're going to understand how to be trustworthy and how to start trusting your partner, creating a fulfilling and secure relationship. Although we're talking about DS dynamics here, this applies to any relationship. I'm Brandon, the Dom. Let's dive in. So trust is really the bedrock of any relationship, not just DS dynamics. However, it is what makes the DS dynamic work and be fulfilling for both parties. What's troubling is how do you actually go through the process of building trust? Because when you try and figure that out, it's often described in vague terms. It's entirely unhelpful when your partner looks at you and says, I don't trust you yet. Furthermore, the way that the dominant builds trust in the submissive's eyes is slightly different than how the submissive is going to build trust in the eyes of the dominant. We also tend to believe that the onus of responsibility is on the other person to demonstrate their trustworthiness before we can trust them. What you'll learn today is that you also have a responsibility in trust building, in taking a risk in trusting that person first. So what is trust? Well, trust researcher Rachel Botsman defines trust as a confident relationship with the unknown. We have trust when we feel safe enough to engage with something without being 100% certain of the outcome, leaving us vulnerable to potential harm. When we trust another person, we're making a declaration that that person could hurt us, but we are confident that they're actually going to act in good faith and to do everything in their power to avoid that from happening. Why is trust so important in DS dynamics? Dominant submissive relationships carry an extra layer of vulnerability. And the reason is because that people that practice BDSM are engaging in play that has higher risks of physical, mental, and emotional harm, especially if they're not approached with attention and care. So in order for us to feel safe enough and to actually enjoy, we have to trust our partners. Trust is what allows us to actually fully engage in our respective roles of the dynamic. If the submissive doesn't trust the Dom, they're never going to fully surrender. If the Dom doesn't trust the submissive, he's not going to invest his total time and energy into the relationship. So let's talk about how to build trust in DS relationships. Trust building really has two sides, being trustworthy and trusting. And both sides are going to require active effort. Let's first talk about what it means to be trustworthy. So Rachel Botsman describes 4 key ingredients we use in order to decide whether we trust someone or not. And these 4 ingredients are incredibly applicable to DS dynamics. So the first ingredient is competency, the ability to do something successfully or effectively. The second is reliability, the ability to consistently deliver predictable outcomes over time. The third is empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. And the fourth is integrity, the quality of being honest and living by principles. For both Doms and submissives, these 4 ingredients are very important. However, how they are demonstrated to the other person on the other side of the slash is very different. So let's break this down. Let's first talk about how to be trustworthy as a Dom. So when someone submits to you, they're putting themselves in an incredibly vulnerable position. Whether you have control of their body or their life, you could easily destroy them mentally, emotionally, or physically if you really wanted to. And this is terrifying for the submissive. To put yourself in their shoes for a second, how vulnerable and anxious do you feel when an entity, say like the government, holds significant power over your life and could destroy you at any moment if they really wanted to? When your submissive says, I don't trust you yet, they need you to demonstrate these 4 ingredients of trustworthiness so they don't feel scared. They need to feel safe around you. So let's tackle each one of these ingredients one by one. First, competency. This means that you're going to need technical skills and decision making. So for technical skills, for your submissive to actually trust you in certain types of play, they need to know that you have the ability to perform that play safely so they don't get hurt and they enjoy the experience. This is a lot of times why somebody who likes being a rope bottom, somebody who likes getting tied up, will usually watch the other person tie a few times before they're like, yeah, go ahead and tie me up. The second part of competency is the decision making. If the submissive is going to give over some control of their life, they need to know that you can actually make effective decisions and lead their life in a positive direction. All right, the second ingredient is reliability. And this breaks down into consistency and dependability. So be consistent in demonstrating your competence, being consistent in making them feel safe, and be consistent in showing up regularly. If you're creating structure for the dynamic, such as setting rules and protocols, be consistent in upholding those rules, rituals, and protocols. The other part of that is dependability. So when your submissive needs your support in any capacity, especially if you caused harm inadvertently, be there for them. All right, the next part is empathy, and there's a lot to break down here. So the first is respecting boundaries, particularly early in the relationship, but really anytime in the relationship. Submissives need to know that when they say stop or no, that you're actually going to stop. So a mistake that I often see guys make is trying to push a simple boundary, say like wearing a condom. And they do this early on in one of the first interactions. Even if you get what you want in that moment, you've ruined trust for the long term, and you'll never be able to expand into other areas that require a lot more trust, getting into the much more kinky, wilder play. Why would they ever trust you if they can't trust you on this simple boundary? The second part of empathy is this culmination of vulnerability, transparency, and openness. Being transparent about your intentions shows that you're not trying to manipulate. When you're open about yourself and your desires, even though they may be rejected, you are making yourself vulnerable, which levels the playing field with her vulnerability, and that breeds trust. All right, the third part of empathy is not judging them. One of our greatest fears as humans is being abandoned. In kink and sex, a lot of people fear being judged for their desires, being called a weirdo or gross or a slut. And if you judge your submissive for their desires, especially early on when they share very mild ones, you're never going to get to experience their deeper fantasies. And then the last part of empathy is to attend to their needs. Dominance isn't just about gaining control. It's about taking on responsibility. So if they've given you control over them, it's now your responsibility to tend to their needs and give them care and safety. So find out what their needs are and correctly prioritize them in your dynamic, which is negotiated between the Dom and Sub, which needs are of priority. But those needs don't go unsaid, they don't go unseen, and you're actively paying attention to them. All right, the last ingredients of trustworthiness is integrity. This is actually pretty simple. So only speak truth. You can't lie about what you truly want or you truly value. Your words need to be grounded in reality. And the more aligned you are with reality, including the reality of your experience, what's going on with you, being truthful about that, the more trustworthy your words and actions will be. The second part of integrity is doing what you say you will do. If you say you're going to do something, big or small, and you actually follow through with that, others are going to give you more trust in the future. They can see that you're a man that can turn potential fantasies into reality. And because of that, if they want their fantasies to come to reality, well, then they're more likely to relinquish control over to you. The other part of integrity is saying what you mean. You can't lie about your intentions, your emotional experience, or your expectations, because if you do, that's only going to cause grief for both of you. You won't get what you want because you didn't speak up for it, and she'll feel betrayed because you weren't honest. And lastly, be who you say you are. Being yourself means that you're not changing your vision, your values, yourself, or your emotional experience to better fit other people. When the world is changing around you, you're staying solid in those vision and values and who you say you are. Instead, you change the circumstances around you. If something's going wrong in your life, you're actively addressing that, bringing your life more in line with your values. That's actually leading. Now let's talk about the flip side of this, how to be trustworthy as a submissive. And this is often the less spoken side of trust. I'm going to be really honest here. I find the phrase, my submission must be earned, to be sort of silly. I understand that it comes from a very good place, and I completely respect that. But I think it also diminishes the fact that the dominant is also giving a gift over to the submissive. And dominance also requires trust to give over. So the submissive also has an onus to demonstrate trustworthiness. The reason is if a Dom has put in the work to become a good Dom, he's likely to put a lot of time, energy, care, and intention into the person that they call their submissive. And what the Dom fears is the submissive taking advantage of that fact, basically manipulating the Dom in order for the submissive to get all their needs met, or wasting the energy that's given over by the Dom and not taking the dynamic seriously, or just abandoning it altogether. All this time and energy and care and attention put into somebody, and then it's all for nothing. That can be extremely frustrating for the Dom, and frankly, one with self-respect is not going to let that happen. So here's how to build your trustworthiness as a submissive using the same 4 ingredients. First is competency. Although you're not building as many skills as the Dom is building because the Dom has to facilitate the experiences, having knowledge about your desires and how they might be demonstrated in ways that you can help that experience that your Dom is facilitating demonstrates that you have a level of commitment to the lifestyle. So if the Dom's putting energy into you, it's less likely to be wasted if you show that you understand what you want and you're invested in the process. Second part is reliability. Again, this is consistency and dependability. So you're going to be consistent in demonstrating your obedience to your Dom and adhering to the structure that the Dom has created. You don't abandon the dynamic when submitting becomes a struggle. Instead, you speak up for yourself. You have negotiations and talks with your Dom. You just don't run away. And in dependability, you show that you support and depend on your Dom in order to make decisions and serve the structure that they have set. Next part is empathy. Just like the Dom is doing, you're respecting the Dom's boundaries because Doms have boundaries too. In fact, they set the boundaries of the dynamic in order to create a container for both of you to play in. These are like walls of a castle. These boundaries keep both of you safe. So if you cross them, there's a likelihood that they're no longer wanting to engage with you because they see that you don't respect the inner world that they are creating for the both of you. Next part of empathy is that vulnerability, transparency, and openness. As a submissive, you are inherently more vulnerable in the dynamic. What breeds trust, though, is not being afraid of that vulnerability. And instead, you understand the risks that you're going to take, and you're still willing to take them. Next, don't judge your Dom. Doms are people too. We're not vending machines that dispense kinks, and we're not superheroes that have no vulnerabilities. They don't want to be judged for their desires or the way they make decisions either. Sure, the way they made a decision may not have been the way that you would make the decision. But if you nitpick their decision making or their competency, it weakens their confidence and their ability to lead effectively. This doesn't mean that you're staying quiet about things going wrong. It means that you're trying to fully understand the decision that they're making and still respecting the power agreement that you guys have set up together. You also need to attend to their needs. So one of the duties of the submissive is service in whatever way that manifests itself. That might be pleasure, that might be intellectual challenge, that might be domestic service, whatever you guys have agreed upon. Your job as a submissive is to make the Dom's life easier so that they can better serve and lead you. All right, next is integrity. So for you as well, you're only speaking truth. So as you're serving the Dom, they also need you to be honest about how your submission is going, physically, mentally, and emotionally, so that they can adjust the structure if needed. If the dynamic is not serving both of you, if your needs are not being met, then you have to speak up. Next part of integrity is do what you say. So a submissive also earns trust by being honest about their actions, even when that means facing discipline. So if you're breaking rules, if you're not following the structure, you're honest about that. Say what you mean. So even though that you're submissive, you can't be a people pleaser and just go along with what your Dom says if it's not what you actually want. The Dom needs to know that when they are acting on some of their more darker or taboo desires, you genuinely want them to do that. Otherwise, they're likely to feel shame and guilt for their actions. And lastly, you need to be who you say you are. A Dom can't create structure or lead somebody that they don't truly understand. If you say you're one person and then prove to be another, they're going to lead you in the wrong direction. And then they're going to be left to blame because it was their responsibility to lead. And this fact makes the Dom hesitant unless you show yourself to be congruent with who you say you are. All right, so that is how to build trustworthiness so that somebody will trust you. Now let's talk about the flip side of this, of being trusting. So everyone has different thresholds for how much trust building behavior they need to see from somebody else before they feel comfortable trusting them. If a person has experienced trauma from having their trust abused in the past, they're likely to be one of those people that are slow burn, as they often describe themselves. Somebody that needs repeated demonstrations of trustworthiness before they can fully let go and surrender. And I see this most often with the submissive side. And what I tell submissives that struggle to actually surrender is at some point, you're going to have to take a leap of faith that your Dom is going to guide you where you want to go. Because even with the best vetting, negotiation, trust building, you still have to take that leap of faith because you can never fully know someone, not 100%. Now, I'm not saying that you need to jump right away to surrendering I'm saying at some point after they have done multiple demonstrations, you're going to have to surrender. You're going to have to take that leap of faith. I know it's really easy to believe that you can't take a risk on somebody without fully trusting them. However, it's that very act of risk taking, or said in another way, of being vulnerable to harm, that allows trust to develop. See, when we take a risk in trusting someone and they don't abuse or they don't take advantage of that, that's when trust builds. That's when trust begins to compound. We begin to take larger and more vulnerable chances with that person. The key here is the size of the risk that you take with that person. So if you struggle with trusting partners, start small. Take a little micro risk, see how they respond, and then if everything goes well, give them more. What you're basically doing here is exposure therapy, gradually increasing your comfort and trust by exposing yourself to small risks and adjusting based on how your partner handles them. So a really simple example of this is sharing your turn-ons during pillow talk. This is a wonderful time to open up because both of you are in this neurochemical high, which makes you more open and receptive to each other. This is going to make sexual desires an easier and more playful conversation. So as you're both lying there and cuddling, you could simply ask, what is something that you've always wanted to try? If I tell you one, will you tell me one? I always advocate for being the person that's vulnerable first, because then it's easier for your partner to follow your lead. You're basically extending an arm out saying, it's okay to be vulnerable. Let me be vulnerable first. So start with something very low stakes, like I've always wanted to try a blindfold, for example. So you'll share that, your partner will respond, and then it'll be your partner's turn with sharing something. And when your partner shares theirs, a critical moment in this trust building exercise is how you respond. Do not judge them. Do not say it's weird. Do not say it's gross. Don't react with a bunch of surprise or discomfort. Instead, encourage them. If it's not something you're into, you basically say, that's really cool that you're into that. I don't think I want to try it, but I'm really glad that you know what you like. Maybe there's something similar that we could explore. What are some of the feelings that are behind that? Maybe we can find something that we both enjoy. That response makes sure that you're still within your own limits and needs. However, it still builds that container of safety and trust. And after you do this a few times, going back and forth on mild desires or fantasies, you can start to share more intimate or edgy ones with each other. And it's going to feel easier because you've already practiced on the mild ones. You've already experienced your partner being open and encouraging and inviting to those desires. Now, when building trust in a DS dynamic, you can actually increase the initial size of risk that you're willing to take in the very beginning by improving your ability to manage your own safety. For example, I'm very comfortable being emotionally vulnerable with somebody early on in a relationship because I've done a lot of work to become secure in myself. Likewise, knowing how to fight or defend yourself is going to increase your own sense of physical safety, allowing you to take larger risks. The other thing you can do is learn the proper techniques for certain types of play. And this is going to make sure that if you're the person doing it, you feel confident in what you're doing. And if you're the person that's having the stuff done to them, you can recognize what proper techniques are. And this is going to increase both your physical and emotional safety as you engage in those things. All right, now let's talk about how to start trusting as a submissive, and then we'll talk about how to start trusting as a dom. So as a submissive, if you want the dominant to take control, you're going to have to give up some control. Mind-blowing, I know. This is the point that I'm getting to, is you have to take a small risk. You have to hand over a little bit of control so that you can see how they do with it. Obviously, do not hand over your entire life and give them all of the power immediately. You have no idea of knowing if they can actually handle that. So start small, and with each successful occasion of giving over control, you can hand more to them the next time. So an excellent way to start this is to say something like, I'd like you to choose for me. And saying this in a playful, non-confrontational way. You're not testing them, but you're encouraging them to step up into that role of leadership. For example, you could ask them to choose what you wear, ask them to choose what you eat if you go out to a restaurant, or you could ask them to plan a date, plan the weekend, plan an entire trip. Now, if they're not used to making decisions for you, they're most likely going to say, I don't know what you want. Don't get frustrated. Reassure them that you would still like them to choose, and let them know how it makes you feel for them to be taking control of you. Now, if they choose something that you don't like, do not berate them. The entire point of this exercise is to put yourself in a situation where their dominant traits can shine and help reinforce your trust in their judgment. The first few times, they're likely to get it wrong. They don't know you well. But over time, they'll become more attuned to you as they build confidence in taking charge and they get valuable feedback from you. This is why I always say that the submissive's voice is very important in the dynamic because it helps give information about how decision making is actually going. The same concept actually applies to play or sex as well. So if you want him to tie you up, start with really simple ties or tools that require less knowledge about how to use, such as using bondage tape instead of rope. And if you've never used bondage tape, it's basically this tape that doesn't stick anything, rather it sticks to itself like a static cling. And then that way it doesn't stick to your clothes or your skin or your hair or anything like that. Really quick and easy to use. You just wrap it around whatever you're trying to tie up. It requires a lot less skill than rope does. And as he's doing this first act, don't criticize him. Don't act ungrateful. Instead, encourage them by acknowledging what they're doing right and share what you're enjoying about it. Maybe ways that it could feel better for you rather than saying they're doing it wrong. All right, now let's talk about how to start trusting as a Dom. So on the other hand, if you are in control of their relationship, you need to know that your decisions and your directions are going to be respected and that they're going to obey those decisions. So as you begin leading this relationship, instead of assigning them 100 rules to follow, which is going to be impossible to do anyways, or expecting them to live out some wild edge fantasy that you've always wanted to do, start small. Give them something manageable. Set just a few easy to follow rules. Do something that's just mildly more dominant than they're used to. See, being a submissive is a skill that also has to be learned. And the best way to learn any skill is by occupying the zone of proximal development, which is the space between where they can do everything on their own. They don't need reminder, support, guidance, structure, any of that, and where they can't do things even with your help. You're looking for that zone right in the middle where it's a little more than they're used to, but with your guidance and support, they're able to successfully do it. And here you're starting small, trusting them with just a few duties so that they can demonstrate their dedication to you as the submissive. And while they're doing this, they are bound to make mistakes. Do not belittle them, support them, encourage them, and gently remind them of the correct way to do something that engages with the structure that you've set or what your desires are. This applies to following rules that you've made in the structure just as much as it applies to how you like to be pleased sexually. Especially in play, if you start small, you'll have the opportunity to observe how she reacts. For example, starting lightly with something like impact play allows you to see if they can gauge their own pain tolerance and whether they can be trusted in calling a safe word or not. And as they continue to be successful, you can start adding more structure or more intensity to your play. And if they're struggling, then help them overcome their challenges or restructure things in order to better facilitate the opportunity for them to demonstrate their trustworthiness. On both sides of this slash, on both sides of the coin, we are trying to set up our partners for success, not testing them, trying to set them up for failure. Your entire dynamic is built on trust. This can be a delicate process, but it's absolutely essential. And your practice is going to be a dual effort, becoming more trustworthy yourself while learning to be more trusting of your partner. And this ongoing practice paves the way for a deep, meaningful, and fulfilling DS dynamic. Now, trust can get more complicated if you start doing this, not just between two people, but you have multiple partnerships or you're doing this non-monogamously. And if that's the case for you, I recommend checking this video out on ethical non-monogamy and the ways to navigate that so that you can create this secure container even between multiple partners. So check that video out, and thank you so much for your time and attention.